Hello, I'm David Kentish. I'm introducing my stories to you so that you can enjoy them in video format no matter where you are. If you would like more information about myself or my stories which I write, you may visit my website.
Beside the Billabong.
Beside the Billabong is a story of life in the Australian outback. Warrigal, a juvenile bunyip of Australian mythology, and his friends find the fun and adventures of living at a billabong. The 5 bush friends, a bunyip, a kookaburra, a possum, a tortoise and a platypus, all play together as friends. They don't see the differences between them, just enjoy each other's company. They enjoy the bush, learning all the time and getting into all sorts of mischief. Let me introduce you to the 5 friends and their home.
Warrigal the bunyip, Keysbrook the kookaburra, Tilpa the tortoise, Pilliga the possum, Pathara the platypus. The 5 friends together.
This is chapter 1 of the 10 chapters which complete the entire story of Beside the Billabong. This sets the scene for the story which will begin in chapter 2. What is a billabong, you might ask? In the land near the bottom of earth, a billabong is like a small lake that used to be part of a river before it changed course. It's like a dead-end creek or river. It usually holds water for a much longer time than the river does. The billabong does not flood very often and it has many large trees around it, so there is plenty of shade from the hot sun in the summer. In the water there are water lilies, reeds and rushes. Many birds live in the trees and they spend their time catching the many bugs which are in the water and around the edge of the billabong on the mud and sand. Some billabongs have steep sides that have been washed by the river, which used to flow. And some other billabongs have shallow sides that seem to continue out into the bush with just a gentle slope. Surrounding this billabong there is a lot of bush, and some of this bush can be very dense, but mostly the bushes are spread apart from each other and allow plenty of sunlight to reach the ground to help the grasses grow. The big gum trees which stand around the billabong also grow in the surrounding bush, and are the home to many animals and birds. These trees also provide a lot of shade to the billabong as their branches extend out over the water. Mostly, billabongs form on nearly level country, and that is the main reason why rivers change their course and make billabongs. Usually on this flat country there is a hill nearby, and that is the case for this billabong. Our billabong is located close to the big river, which has been flowing near the bottom of earth. But this flow of water occurs only after there has been some rain upstream. This usually flows in the winter. It mostly flows in the spring. It sometimes flows in the early summer, but rarely does it flow near the end of summer or in the autumn. The flat country which surrounds the billabong has some trees and bush on it, and not very far away there is a hill. Beside the Billabong, chapter 2. In this chapter we will meet the bunyips. Now, bunyips have been around the Australian bush ever since time began. Bunyips are very elusive animals because they are so very shy, and this is the main reason why they have not been seen very often by people. Both male and female bunyips have 2 very large canine teeth, which extend from the top jaw down beyond the lower jaw. Their teeth look somewhat like those of a walrus. These teeth are mainly used to scare away those who would attack the bunyip. Just the sight of the teeth scares most animals away, so they really need to use them for defence. The bunyip's nose is flat, similar to the nose of a pig. This flat nose helps them to collect some of the food in the ground. The adult bunyip stands about 2 metres tall. They have a long thick tail which they use to balance themselves. Also very strong hind legs which carry their body in an upright stance, somewhat like a kangaroo. Their feet are fitted with pads like a dog, and they have 6 long toes on each foot, with long tarred toenails or claws at the end of each toe. This allows them to climb up over rocks, up trees and scratch around the ground so they can dig up some of their favourite foods. Their front legs are shorter, a bit like human arms, but they have a very strong grip from the claws which grow from their 6 fingers and that extend from their broad hands. The bunyip's back is covered in a thick leathery hide that looks very similar to that skin of a crocodile. The patterns of the marks on the back are larger than the pattern of the skin which covers the sides, tummy and chest. The tough skin on their back forms a ridge at the centre of his back. The ridge is low near the top of the neck, but protrudes more prominently down the back and then gets smaller again down the tail. This tough skin makes it very hard for other animals to get their claws into the bunyip skin, if they should ever attack the bunyip, that is. This tough skin is another form of defence for the bunyip. The skin is blue in colour and darker on the back than the front. In fact, the skin on the chest is almost the colour of the sky on a very hot day. The skin of the bunyip is very tough and flexible, but it's not hard like the back of a turtle. Many other animals laugh at them when they see them because they think that bunyips look so funny. Bunyips don't like being laughed at, so they tend to hide away from other animals and just keep to themselves. The food of the bunyip consists of yams and roots which they dig from the ground using their claws and nose. They also get honey from the native beehives, and sometimes they'll need to climb well up into the tree to collect this honey. Some sweet grasses grow around the billabong and are also good tucker for the bunyip. Although the bunyip is a very docile character, the male will defend himself, his family and his territory very ferociously. The female bunyip is only just a little more docile. Most times, just by displaying their large teeth, attacking animals will back away from the bunyip, being afraid of those big teeth. But there are some animals who have told us some very frightening stories of things which have happened to them. So the legend says that the bunyip is a very ferocious animal and must not be approached under any circumstances, or you'll be harshly dealt with by the bunyip. This could sometimes mean a terrible injury or even death to anyone who is foolish enough to attack a bunyip. With this legend which has been built up over the years, you'd think that all bunyips will be lonely. Well, that might be so, but not necessarily the case for young bunyips. Like most young animals, young bunyips like to play. They already have their big teeth which will grow larger as a young bunyip grows older. Anyway, the other animals don't seem as anything else but a playmate, someone to spend some time having fun with, beside the billabong. The young bunyip in our story has been named by his parents as Warrigal the bunyip. Warrigal and his friends. Now that we've learnt about what a billabong is in chapter 1, and know about the bunyips in chapter 2, let's meet some more of the other bush friends who play together beside the billabong. The platypus is a most unusual looking animal. It has a furry body like a cat, a flat wide tail similar to an otter, a flat bill and face like a duck. Their feet are also similar to that of the otter. They too are webbed for swimming, as they spend so much of their time underwater. In the water of this billabong there are several families of platypus. Their favourite food of the platypus is small crustaceans, beetles and other bugs which live in and around the billabong. They spend a lot of their time asleep in the day, but sometimes the young ones are out playing in the sunshine. The most playful of these young ones is Pithara the platypus. Beside the billabong in the bushes live the tortoises. The tortoise is a reptile that looks much like a turtle. It has a firm brown shell and can withdraw its head and legs into the shell to protect itself. It slowly wanders around feeding on grass, leaves and sometimes bugs are added to its diet. There are two tortoise families beside this billabong. Only one of the young tortoises likes to play, and his name is Tilpa the tortoise. The big gum trees which stand beside the billabong are also home to possums. The possum is about the size of a cat, but with a longer tail. It is covered in fur, has a pink snout, and a pointy nose with long whiskers. The possums spend all day asleep and come out at night to find themselves some food. They prefer to eat berries, seeds and leaves from their favourite plants which grow beside the billabong. There are several possum families beside the billabong, but only one family has a young one. That young one is called Pilliga the possum. Some of the old branches have broken from the trees, and where they are broken off there are holes and hollows. A family of kookaburras has made one of these holes in the branch of a tall gum tree their home. The kookaburra is the largest of the kingfishers. Mostly the kookaburra will feed on anything that crawls. They love to eat worms, bugs and even some small snakes. If there are some fish in the billabong, they will prey on them too. The kookaburra has pale grey feathers at the front and brown at the back and wings, usually with a blue section of feathers. They have a loud call that sounds like they are laughing. The kookaburras have brought up a brood of young, and one of these young is called Keysbrook the kookaburra. Just beyond the edge of the billabong is a low bank, which is strewn with boulders. Between these boulders there is an area of soft soil. In this soft soil live some different snakes. One family of snakes who live here is the olive green python. Olive green snakes are big snakes and can be aggressive at times. They grow up to 4 metres and can have a big appetite. They only had one of their young survive the long hot summer last year and did not have any more this year. That one is named Omeo, the olive green python, and he would be about 1 year older than the other bush kids who like to play together. He does not mix in with the others and is always watching them playing and having fun from a distance. How he would just love to be there and have some friends to play with, but the other friends just could not trust the snake to play with them. Because these few bush friends get on so well together despite their differences, they all have a lot of fun around the billabong, which is their home. On most days around the billabong you would see this group of friends playing together and having fun. Warrigal the bunyip, Pithara the platypus, Tilpa the tortoise, Pilliga the possum and Keysbrook the kookaburra. They would play together for hours on end, having all sorts of fun and quite often getting into mischief too. Well, that's the end of chapter 3. Beside the billabong, chapter 4. Now that we've learned all about the billabongs and the 5 bush friends who live and play there, let's have a look at some of the things that they get up to. Today they are playing their game of hide and seek. This is a very interesting game because of the different animals that take part in the game. Warrigal the bunyip has some special talents that allows him to climb trees. He grasps the trunk with his claws of his feet, and he very quickly climbs well up into a large tree and can hide amongst the leaves. Pithara the platypus can stay underwater for a very long time, and when the water is muddy it can be very difficult to find him in the dirty water under the reeds. Tilpa the tortoise can bury herself amongst the rocks, and because her hard shell looks very much like a rock, she can hide very well too. Pilliga the possum just loves to climb trees too, so it is expected that he would do that. But he can also hide amongst the reeds by the water. Keysbrook the kookaburra is an expert flyer. Even at this young age he can fly to the top of all the trees in a few seconds, or get in amongst the bushes and be very difficult to find. So that they could start the game, they need to find one of them who had to go eat. He is the one who must count to 10 while hiding his eyes from everyone else, so they can hide. Then he would go off and find the others before they could get back to the place from where they started. To work out who is going to go eat first, they selected from some straws that Warrigal had collected and held in his hand. Pilliga the possum picked a short straw. "Oh, but I went it first the last time we played this game," he cried. "I don't want to go first again." "But that's the rules," they all shouted at the same time. So poor Pilliga stood behind the tree, hiding his eyes with his hand, and began counting. 1, 2, 3. Before he could get to 2, the others took off at a speed so fast that they looked like a blur. They ran in all directions, so that it would make the job very difficult for Pilliga to search them out and tag them when he found them. 4, 5, 6. By now everyone was in their hiding places waiting for Pilliga to complete his counting. 7, 8, 9, he continued until 10, coming ready or not, he yelled, and turned around to decide where he was going to head first. They had played this game several times, and it was always exciting to see where everyone had hidden themselves. He could see their tracks in the sand, but they were confusing, as each of the tracks headed off in a different direction. He knew Pithara the platypus would be hiding in the water by the reeds, so he headed there first. Pithara was well hidden, but he needed to come to the surface to get a breath of air. Just as Pilliga was passing, his beak popped above the water, and Pilliga yelled out, "I see you, Pithara, you're tagged." Pithara the platypus crawled out of the water and went to stand by the tree where they all started from. Pilliga walked a little further and turned to the right, and poking out from under the bush is the tip of a tail. He looked at the colour of it and reckoned that it must be Tilpa the tortoise. "I see you, Tilpa, you're tagged," he yelled out of his excitement. Tilpa crawled out from under the bush, and she too went over to the tree and stood beside Pithara. While Pilliga the possum was watching Tilpa the tortoise waddle back to the tree, he heard a soft sound in the tree just above it and to his left. When he looked up, he could see the end of Warrigal's tail between the leaves of the bushy tree. "I see you, Warrigal, you're tagged." He stood back as Warrigal climbed, or almost fell down from the tree. His feet might be good for climbing, but he hasn't learnt how to come down from the tree properly yet. But he didn't hurt himself, and off he jogged to get back to the tree where the others were waiting for him. Pilliga the possum didn't know where to look to find Keesbrook the kookaburra. He knew that he flies up into the tops of the trees, and this made it very, very difficult for Pilliga to see him. But Keesbrook, being the good kookaburra that he is, had just learnt that if he sees a grub in the shade near the base of a bush, he should fly down and collect it in his beak, because they were very tasty and he was always hungry. Just before he landed near the grub that was wriggling by the base of the bush, he is spotted by Pilliga the possum. Pilliga jumped for joy, as he certainly did not expect to find Keesbrook quite so easily. "I see you, Keesbrook, you're tagged too," he exclaimed in his very excited voice. "That's all of you now, and as you were the first one tagged, Pithara, you have to go it next time." So just after Pilliga and Keesbrook joined the others, Pithara took his turn at being it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, he counted, as the others scampered away to their individual hiding places. 7, 8, 9, 10, coming ready or not, Pithara cried out as he left the tree in search of the others, who had found some very good hiding places. And so the 5 friends spent the rest of the day playing hide and seek, and never once were any of them found in the same place more than once. There are just so many fun places in which to hide. Before they knew it, the shadows became longer as the day grew older, and so they all headed off home to be with their families for the night. They are tired, and after their small evening meals they all sleep soundly because all of the excitement and fun they'd had during the day with their friends, playing hide and seek by the Billabong. We have come to the end of chapter 4 with all of the 5 bush friends all sound asleep. Beside the Billabong, chapter 5. Now that we know all about Billabongs, bunyips, the 5 bush friends, and played with them before, here's the next chapter in their adventuresome lives. Bats in the Cave. Today we find Warrigal the bunyip and his friends playing at the edge of the Billabong once again. On hot days, usually around the middle of summer, Warrigal and his friends like to play in the sand under the cool shade of the trees with the water's edge not very far away. There are the 5 friends all playing together. There is Warrigal the bunyip, Pilliga the possum, Pithara the platypus, Tilpa the tortoise and Keysbrook the kookaburra. It is very hot, so after a time they decide to take a swim in the water. The swim in the cooler water of the Billabong is very welcome for most of them. Both Warrigal and Pithara are very good swimmers, and they stay in the water playing for ages. They have a stone, and when one of them throws it into the water, the other dives down and retrieves it. Sometimes it would lodge in the mud, and it takes them several attempts to bring it back again. Pilliga and Tilpa would just walk around the edge and wade into the water from time to time just to keep their feet wet. They are not very good at swimming, so they would be safer staying by the edge of the water. Frequently, Keysbrook flies down from a branch of the tree, skims the surface of the water and collects some of the water in his beak. Sometimes he gets his feathers wet, and when he lands on the branch again, he fluffs his feathers up, shakes himself, and the water would wet his skin. This is what he needs to do so that he too can keep cool. From his perch in the tree, Keysbrook also keeps a lookout for their worst enemy. Omeo, the olive green python, likes to keep cool in the water too, and sometimes he tries to swim close to the friends. He just wants to be friends with them too, but they are very afraid of Omeo because he is a snake. Keysbrook could see him coming and watches as Omeo swims closer and closer to the friends in the water. Because he is swimming near the surface of the water, he is easy to see. When Omeo is close enough, Keysbrook screeches out very loudly to warn everybody else of the danger. Coo-coo ka-ka, look out everyone, here comes Omeo the snake, he calls at the top of his voice. As they are afraid of the snake, they all get out of the water and let Omeo swing past. This was the best way to keep from being a meal for Omeo. After Omeo had gone safely past the friends, they all go back into the water again, as it is very hot on the sand, even in the shade of the tree. The 5 friends all enjoy the water. They keep playing until the sun begins to dip behind the hill. Now they must all return home to their families. They say goodbye to each other and head off to their own homes, and arrive there just before the sunset finishes and the night begins. It is a new morning, and just a little time after sunrise, the friends all gather again beside the waterhole. This morning it is cloudy, so the day doesn't look like it's going to be as hot or as uncomfortable as it was yesterday. There are some caves near the stony bank just a little distance away from the waterhole. Today the friends decide to visit the cave and have a look around. There was a rumour that there was something special in the cave, and they wanted to check it out to see if they could find the something special. The opening to the cave is very easy for them to get to, but Pithara is having some difficulty because he is used to spending most of his time in the water. The friends slow down that he could keep up the pace. His little short legs made him a lot slower than them. Presently they came to a small stream. Now this is just what Pithara was looking for. Some water to swim in, so in he hops. The others walk in a single file alongside the stream in the moist sand, while Pithara swims along in the slow-moving water. The further they go into the cave, the darker it gets. So they just stopped to wait for a few minutes, and presently their eyes adjusted to the gloom and they could see a little better. Warrigal has brought with him a small torch and some spare batteries. He carries this so he can turn on the torch when it gets too dark to see. There is a bend in the cave, and as they walk around it, the light becomes less, and again it is difficult to see. They pause and stand for a few moments to let their eyes adjust to the now very dim light once more. Presently they can see some very tiny lights up ahead, just glowing in the darkness. "What's that up there?" Pilliga asks. "What is it that makes the lights?" Tilpa said that he couldn't see anything, as her eyes weren't too good. Warrigal answered for the others, "Why, that's the special thing that we've come to see. They are the glowworms. They hang off the ceiling and put out just enough light so that we can see." They all looked at the glowworms. By now they were so close that even Tilpa could see them too. Warrigal turned on the torch. The light is so bright that they could not see the glowworms now. When he turned it off again, there were the glowworms, just where they had been before. For quite a while the friends all looked at the lovely sight of the glowworms, which seemed to be pulsing in the darkness. Brighter they would glow, and after a short time they would grow dull, but not all at the same time. While some remained bright, some others would become dim. The bright ones would dim, the dim ones would become bright. As the glowworms are doing this, the friends are having just enough light to see. They certainly enjoy the display that the glowworms are putting on for them. They can see the stalagmites as they try to reach the ceiling, which is just above Warrigal's head. They can see where a stalactite has fallen from the roof and lay on the floor of the cave. They can see the walls of the cave, which is just wide enough for the three of them to stand side by side. They can just see the edge of the stream so they won't fall in and join Pathara. But there is something which they can't see. Way down in the back of the cave there is a large family of bats. They hang from the ceiling during the day, and when it is night time, just after sunset in fact, they drop down from their perches in the ceiling and they fly out of the cave, out to where they can find their food. The friends do not know it, but they have been in the cave all day long looking around. Pilliga the possum is the first to hear the sound. It just sounds like a very faint squeaking noise, and the flapping of bird wings. The flapping of the wings is a sound which he had heard before, but he didn't think that there would be birds in the cave, well, apart from Geesbrook the kookaburra, that is. Presently the sound became louder and the others could hear it too. "What's that sound?" they called, all of them now being a bit startled. Just then a group of bats fly by them. The friends cannot see them very well, so Warrigal turns on his torch. There are bats in the beam of his torch, and as he swings the torch around, he can see the whole cave is alive with flying bats. They are all flying in the same direction, to the front of the cave. The bats seem to fly around without even touching them. Sometimes they can feel a gentle puff of wind from the wings as the bats as they fly past, but none of the friends has had a bat fly into them. Not only could they hear the beating of the bat's wings, but also that faint squeaking sound which Pilly could hear before anyone else. There are thousands of bats. They all make their noises, and with so many bats that the noise in the cave is immense. The noise is so loud that the friends can no longer hear each other speak. Geesbrook jumped up on Warrigal's shoulder and screeched in his ear, "Let's get out of here before they get us." Warrigal swung his torch around and shot on the friends, shaking the torch in the direction of the front of the cave. They are all frightened by the sudden appearance of the bats, so they all run. Geesbrook doesn't fly because he can't see well enough until the light from the front of the cave is bright enough. Then he takes off at full speed. Tilpa is going fast as he can, but tortoises can't walk very fast. Pilliga is bounding along on four legs. Pathara is fine because he is swimming in the water. There are no bats there. Warrigal begins to run, but he fell over when his toenail got caught under a rock. He lands on the floor, rolls over several times, then he's on his feet again, running fast. First out of the cave are some bats. They are closely followed by Keysbrook. Next comes some more bats, followed by Warrigal. Pilliga is the next. As he comes out to the mouth of the cave, he lays exhausted on the ground, propped up by a couple of rocks. Bithara follows Pilliga shortly, and he too sits down beside Pilliga. Most of the bats have left the cave by the time poor old Tulpa emerges. She works very hard to keep up with the others. She too is exhausted and rests on the ground near the others. In a few moments there is a mass exodus of bats from the mouth of the cave. The evening sky, which has already become dark, is almost blackened by the big cloud of bats. The friends all sit together, and as they caught their breath, they begin to speak softly. "Wow," they said. "I didn't know there were so many bats in the cave, or that they made so much noise." "Well," said Warrigal, "I knew there was bats in there because I've seen some of them come out, but I never have seen so many or heard such a noise as that before." Keysbrook exclaimed, "I thought that my life had ended back there. I was so frightened." By this time the sunset had finished, and all of them should be at home, but it's going to take them a little while for them to get their breath back before they continue on their way home again. Just as they are getting on their feet, along came Omeo. The older snake just snickers at them. "Frightened by a few bats, are you? Ha ha," he said as he slithered away in his wicked laugh. "Well," said Bithara, "I don't think it was funny at all. We could have been killed dead," he said. The others all agreed with him. Presently, when they had recovered, they said goodbye to each other and go their own ways to their own homes to be with their families. Perhaps they might tell others around the Billabong of their experience in the cave, or perhaps they might not. What do you think? After the five bush friends had such a terrific adventure in the cave, let's have a look at what they get up to in this chapter. Chapter 6. When breezes blow, the kite flies. Today, Warrigal and his friends decide to make a kite. Well, my dad told me all about kites. He told me how to make a kite and how much fun it can be to play with once we have made it. He said we need things like a frame, something to cover it, some string and a tail, said Warrigal. Yeah, my uncle told me stuff about kites too. We need to make a big one, said Pilliga. But not too big, said Keysbrook, or we'll never be able to hold it. That's no worries, came in Tulpa. I can hold anything in my mouth. Bithara is worried. I've never made a kite before, is it scary? The others answered at the same time, no, it's not scary, Bithara. Next they have to find everything which they require to make the kite. They spent some time making a list of all the things that the kite needed for its construction. On the list they have things like string, tail, frame and a cover. Now we have to work out where we get all these things from, said Warrigal with some authority. Tulpa told the others, I know I can get some strong reeds by the edge of the Billabong. They should be fine for the frame. Wow, that's great, the others shouted at the same time. Pilliga said, well, I can get a lot of web from the old golden orb spider up in the tree. That should do for the cover over the frame. It's strong too. Yes, that sounds good, but do you think it will stop the breeze from blowing right through the kite? Questioned Warrigal. Bithara is jumping up and down. I know. I can gather up all of those wings that the flying termites have left behind. We can stick them to the spider web to make an even better cover for our kite. Keysbrook had an idea for the string. See all the fine roots on the vines? Well, I reckon I can take some of those and make all the string we need for the kite. And for the tail, said Warrigal, we can use some of Keysbrook's string and tie some leaves from the fig tree to it. It seems that between them they have it organised. So off they head, out into the bush to collect all the items which are on the list to make the kite so they can have some fun today. Tilpa heads off on her way to collect the reeds. She found some good strong ones that she reckoned would be good for the frame, and shortly she makes her way back to the place where she meets the others. Pilliga returns after he climbed up into the trees and collected a big bundle of spiderweb. It is an old one that the golden orb spider didn't need anymore. Bithara takes a bit longer than the rest, as he has a lot of old termite wings to collect, so he is the last one to return. Keysbrook flies down from the tree where he has made a big ball of string which he has spun from the fibres of the vine roots. Warrigal takes some time collecting some strong leaves from the fig tree that they can use for the tail. They gather all of the items that they have collected. Now they had to put all the pieces together to complete the kite. Warrigal takes 2 pieces of reeds and ties them in a cross pattern. He uses some of the string to do this. Pilliga then wraps the spider web around the frame, and while he is doing this, Bithara spreads the termite wings all over the web. This does make a very good cover for the kite. Keysbrook ties some of the string to the front of the kite and ties the other end to a stick on the ground a long way away. With a piece of string twice as long as he is tall and the fig leaves, Warrigal makes the tail so the kite has some balance. Warrigal stands the kite on its pointy end and the top of it is just above his head. They all stand back and admire their handiwork. "Well, that looks pretty good to me," said Warrigal. They all agree that it did in fact look good. But they have a problem. There is not any breeze. They cannot fly the kite which they had spent so much time in making if there's no breeze. "I know," cried Keysbrook. "I'll fly up into the air and find where there is some breeze and I'll come back and tell you." They all thought that this was a good way to find the breeze. So off flies Keysbrook up into the air, and presently he can feel some wind, but he's not very close to where his other friends have gathered. He flies over to the hill and lands near the top. Here he can feel the breeze on his feathers and know that this is where they would have to be so that they can fly the kite. So then he flies back to where the other friends are gathered and told them. After Warrigal rolled up the string, they all climbed the hill, and by about the middle of the day they were ready to fly the kite. Because Warrigal is the heaviest of the friends, the string which tethers the kite is tied to his tail, so that it would not lose the kite. Warrigal stands with his back to wind holding the string. Pilliga climbs up a tree and with another piece of string pulls up the kite. He is standing at the very top of the tree, but by now the breeze has stopped blowing again, so they still can't get the kite to fly. Tilpa had a firm hold of the tail in her mouth to keep the kite upright. Keysbrook said to the others, "I'll take hold of the top of the kite and fly up into the sky and see if there's some breeze up there." The others reckon that this is a good idea, so off flies Keysbrook. His wings were working hard as he lifted the kite up into the air. He couldn't go too high because Tilpa still had a hold of the tail. The breeze is too light for the kite to fly, but just as Keysbrook was about to let go of the top of the kite, a strong gust of wind takes it out of his bill, and he can do nothing but let it go. Up in the air goes the kite until it pulls on the string which is tied to Warrigal's tail. He can feel the tug of the kite as the string pulls. Tilpa has a firm hold of the tail of the kite, is whisked up into the air at a fast rate of speed. The others can see her flying up into the air and yell to her, "Hang on tight, Tilpa!" So Tilpa has to hang on tight so she won't fall to the ground and hurt herself. Just as well that the tortoise's mouth is strong, because that is what Tilpa is hanging on by. The gust of wind is lasting for a long time and the kite is swinging away. It swings from the right to the left and back again. Well, at least they know that their kite flies well, but poor old Tilpa is still hanging on tight to the tail of the kite. Warrigal still has the string tied to his tail and the power of the kite is pulling him along the ground. He catches hold of a rock to stop himself from falling off the edge of the hill. Pilliga is still up in the tree and has a grandstand view of everything which is happening. Keysbrook is still flying after letting go of the top of the kite, and poor old Tilpa became scared as he watched on. Just then the gust of wind which had lifted the kite up into the air stopped, and the string that is attached to Warrigal's tail becomes slack. At the same time the kite stops climbing and begins falling to the ground. Warrigal takes hold of the string and starts pulling, trying to keep the kite the right way up, but it seems he isn't very successful. The kite continues to fall. But with Warrigal pulling on the string, the kite is getting closer to the tree where Pilliga is sitting. Presently the tail of the kite lands in the tree, and poor old Tilpa lets go the tail and becomes jammed between two branches right near the top of the tree. When he lets go of the tail, the kite becomes lighter once more, and there is just enough breeze to lift it up again, so up the kite flies into the sky once more. The string then begins to pull, but Warrigal has it tied to his tail and has a strong hold of the rock. He has some loose string in his hand, so he slowly lets this out, and the kite goes up into the air again, even higher than before. Now that the kite is flying so well, everyone is jumping up and down for joy at seeing their kite fly so well now that it isn't weighted down. But poor old Tilpa is stuck in the tree, upside down, and cannot move. "Help, help, I'm stuck up here," she yells out in a frightened voice. "Okay, Tilpa, I'm just nearby," said Pilliga. "I'm coming up and I'll help you down." The others are having so much fun with the kite that they don't hear Tilpa yelling. Pilliga, who has climbed the tree, tries pushing from underneath, but Tilpa is wedged in too tight from the tree's branches for her to be budged. Just at this moment the breeze stops completely, and the kite continues on its downward spiral to the ground near the top of the hill. It comes down very fast. Pilliga can see it coming, and it is coming directly for him, so he begins to run away from it. But being a platypus, he cannot run too fast on the ground, so the kite just keeps coming straight for him. The kite hits the ground on its point, just missing Pathara, but then it falls over and covers him. "Ouch!" said Pathara as he crawled out from under the kite. "I thought that you said flying kites was not scary. I don't believe you anymore. Boy, was I scared." Now that the kite is on the ground, they can all hear Tilpa up in the tree yelling and Pilliga calling out for help. They can see Tilpa upside down, caught in the branches of the tree. Pilliga is just pushing from beneath, but she cannot get her unstuck. Warrigal climbs up the tree, and by helping Pilliga, they are able to free Tilpa from the branches. But tortoises can't climb trees, so she takes hold of a few of the ridges on Warrigal's back with her mouth, and they come down from the tree together. Now that everyone is safely on the ground, they gather around the kite to find out if it could still fly. But it is completely smashed when it hit the ground. The reeds of the frame were snapped. The web of the cover had parted. The termite wings had mostly fallen off, and most of the fig leaves on the tail are torn. But the string is still okay. Pilliga said, "I reckon that we've had enough fun for one day." Pathara yelled, "Yeah, and it was scary too." Tilpa, who didn't like heights, said, "Yeah, and I thought it was scary too. I don't like kites anymore either." Keysbrook said, "I reckon we should keep the string for another time." Warrigal was the last of them to speak, as he shows his hands and tail to the others, and they could see the marks from the string as it had pulled tight. "I think we'll find something else to do next time." As the sun is beginning to set, they all climb down from the hill and head off to their homes, as has been a very eventful day. They probably would have slept very soundly that night after all that fun. What do you think? We've been with the 5 bush friends now on several of their adventures. Let's see what they're up to in chapter 7 of Beside the Billabong. Too much rain makes it flood. The heat of the long hot summer has got a bit less over the last few weeks, and now there are some clouds building up over in the west from the Billabong. This build-up has been happening for a few days, and the humidity is climbing. The 5 bush friends, Warrigal the bunyip, Pilliga the possum, Pythara the platypus, Tilpa the tortoise, and Keysbrook the kookaburra are all playing hopscotch in the sand near the big tree, close to the edge of the Billabong. The sand is cool and levelled, and here they have no trouble setting out the game. They have drawn the squares on the ground and are taking in turns to play. Poor old Pythara is at a disadvantage because he is so much smaller than the others, so they draw a smaller lot of squares just for him. It is much cooler now that the heat of summer has passed. The days are now a bit shorter too, and it's much more pleasant playing near the Billabong with the cooler weather. The water in the Billabong is still a long way from the old shoreline, so they keep to the sand by the old tree. Most of the friends have not seen rain before because it hasn't rained here at the Billabong last year. The water that was in the Billabong before the summer began had come from upstream where it had rained heavily. There was not enough water in the river back then to cause a flood, but just enough to fill up all the pools. But there had not been any rain here in the Billabong. "My dad said we might see some rain soon," said Warrigal. "He reckons that this humidity is a sign of rain coming." "What's rain?" asked the other friends. "My dad said we need rain to put some water back in the Billabong," Warrigal told them. "Does that mean that rain is water?" asked Keysbrook. "Well, yeah, I suppose it does," replied Warrigal. "So that means when it rains we get wet, is that right?" asked Pilliga. "Well, I suppose so," replied Warrigal again. "Well, I don't like getting wet," said Tilpa. "It makes it difficult for me to get around on wet ground. My feet slip in the mud near the Billabong, so I don't like it when it's wet." "I love the water, so I'll look forward to the rain if it will put more water in the Billabong," said Pythara. "Then I can have more room to swim in." "When I get wet, I get cold," exclaimed Keysbrook. "So does that mean that when it rains, it gets wet too?" he asked. "I suppose so, but I really don't know. I just told you what my dad said, as I have never seen rain before either," said Warrigal. "My dad has seen rain lots of times, so I reckon he would know all about it." They continued playing their game until the sunset began. Then, as always, that is the time when they must go home. "See yous all tomorrow," yelled Warrigal as they parted and went on their way. "See ya," they all answered. It was difficult sleeping that night because of the humidity, and just as sunrise began showing itself, some loud noises can be heard away out in the distance. The 5 friends had not heard thunder before, and they were all scared of it. But their parents, who had seen many winters and heard a lot of thunder, told them that the thunder is nothing to be afraid of. It's just a lot of hot air and noise. But they were told that they should not be near trees or near the top of the hill, as the lightning which makes the thunder can be dangerous. So they all know that they can neither play near the big tree by the Billabong nor the top of the hill. By the time that the 5 friends have got together by the Billabong, the sun had disappeared behind the clouds. Now all the friends had seen clouds before, but these clouds are dark and heavy, with the bottoms of them just above the top of the hill. Some of the clouds are moving fast and changing shape as they watched. "I flew up there a while ago and all I could see around was clouds," Keysbrook told them as he flew down and perched on his favourite place, on top of Warrigal's head. "Wow," said the others. "That must mean the rain is going to happen soon." Presently there was a very bright flash of lightning that struck the ground just over by the hill. Almost instantly there was an almighty bang as the thunder made its very loud noise. This frightened the 5 friends, Although they had heard the thunder in the distance during the night, they had not seen lightning so close or heard thunder so loud before. "I'm scared," exclaimed Pilliga. "I don't like loud noises, they frighten me so much." "Me too," the others all replied at the same time. The 5 friends all huddled together as the lightning and the thunder continued for a while. They hold their hands over the ears so the noise is not quite so loud. Presently it begins to rain. At first there are just a few drops. These are big drops, and one of them lands on Pilliga's head, and he exclaimed, "Ouch, that hurt." Although the drops are big, there is not many of them, and it takes a while for them all to join up together on the ground. The 5 friends watch the drops as they fall on the ground. A leaf that had fallen from the tree lies on the ground, curl up at the edges. The leaf is flipped over when a big raindrop hits it. Some of the grains of sand which are on the ground are shifting sideways as the raindrop hits them. As they watch, they can see a lot more of the grains of sand being moved as the raindrops hit them too. More of the curly leaves are jumping as the raindrops hit them. Once the drops are all joined together on the ground, then many more drops begin falling. Soon the rain is so heavy that the 5 friends could not see the hill which is close by. It does not take long before the raindrops, which have all joined together on the ground, begin to make small puddles. They watched as more raindrops land in the small puddles and make big splashes. Some of the old leaves begin to float on the puddles, and when one of these is hit by another big raindrop, it sinks to the bottom of the puddle. Rain has been falling for a while now, and the puddles have become larger. Many of the smaller puddles are joining together to make larger puddles. As the 5 friends are standing on a bit of a slope, the puddles begin to move down the slope towards the water, which still remains in the Billabong. Presently, as the water moves, it begins taking some of the sand with it, and shortly some of the small streams begin to carry more and more sand and mud with it, so that soon small creeks are formed on the ground as the water moves to the lower parts of the Billabong. By this time, the 5 friends are quite wet. "Wow, this is great," yelled Pithara the platypus. "The rain is going to make the Billabong much larger, and we'll have so much more room to swim in." "Well, I don't know about that," replied Keysbrook the kookaburra. "I'm wet and cold, and I don't like it very much." "No, I don't like it either," said Tilpa. "As the ground is now so wet and slippery, it makes it very hard for me to get around." "Oh, come on, you guys," yelled Warrigal. "This is fun. Look at those old leaves dancing under the raindrops. Have you ever seen anything as funny as that before?" Pilliga the possum is not happy that he is wet, as now he was beginning to feel the cold too. "Yeah, it is great to see all the rain. Look at the puddles now, they are so full they are all joining together and flowing down to the water in the Billabong," he told them. The rain continues to fall as the friends watch. By the time it got dark at the end of the day, it is still raining. "I think we'd better all go home and see if we can get a bit warmer, as I think it's going to get colder in the night," said Warrigal. The rain didn't make him cold, but he was thinking of his friends, as he knew that they did feel the cold, particularly Keysbrook, as his home was up in the tree. The 5 friends all head off to their homes, and are made comfortable by their families. When they all join together near their favourite place by the old tree in the Billabong next morning, it is still raining. "Wow!" exclaimed Pilliga. "Look how full the Billabong is now." The water in the Billabong is just a little way from the base of the tree where they were playing a few days ago. It is now being covered by the water. "Yeah, there is more water in the Billabong now," replied Pithara. "But just look at the colour of it. It's very dirty." "That's right," commented Warrigal. "That must be from all the mud which the raindrops have made when they hit the ground." Tilpa could see that when the puddles began to flow, they made the water dirty, so she told the others, "I think that when the puddles move over the soil, it gets muddy very quickly. That must be what makes the water dirty." The rain kept falling for the next few days, and soon the level of the water in the Billabong was so high that it begins to flow out over the old bank, which has been there for such a long time. As the water flows over this old bank, it takes some of the bank with it and makes more muddy water. The 5 friends walk alongside this water as it spreads out over the flat ground that is beside the Billabong. But the rain is also filling up the big river that is beside the Billabong. The water is now flowing faster than the river, which has not had so much water in it for years. Before too long the river burst its banks and it added to the water which is flowing out of the banks of the Billabong. Soon all of the flat ground that lies around the Billabong and the big river is covered in water. The 5 friends have not been to the river, as their parents have told them not to go there because there are some dangers. But the 5 friends knew that they could climb up the hill, which is nearby now that the lightning and thunder had stopped. They climb up the hill and stand by the tree where they had launched their kite from, and look out over the flat ground. The Billabong and the big river are in the background. As far as they can see, there is water. All of the flat ground is covered in water. At the river, all they can see are the tops of the trees that is sticking out above the water. They can see the Billabong and the water had gone over the bank. The water in the Billabong was higher than it had been for many years. "Well, that must be what happens when so much rain falls," said Warrigal. "It just spreads out everywhere." "Boy, there must be lots of drops out there," countered Tilpa. "I've never seen so much water before." "Yeah, I reckon," commented Pilliga. "There must be many, many more drops than I know numbers for. The edges near the water are so muddy and slippery that I can't get close to it," complained Tilpa. "But look at how much water there is to swim in," replied Pithara. "It'll be great now. I can swim for hours and not swim in the same water very long." The 5 friends just gazed at all of the water that has spread around the flat country, and presently return to their homes as the day begins to get darker and night approaches. They have just experienced their first floods. What did you do when you saw your first rain? Were you terrified, scared, happy or relieved? And now that we've been with the 5 bush friends on many of their adventures, let's see what they're up to on episode 8 of Beside the Billabong. This episode is Floating on the Raft. The friends had watched the floods that had happened a few weeks ago from on top of the hill, which is not far from the Billabong. They reckoned that the floods were the best thing they had seen for a long time, and each day they walked to the top of the hill and looked out over the flat ground that is still covered in water. All they could see, for as far as they could see, are a few treetops as they stood out above the water. There is a small hill a long way away, and it had some small trees on it too. They could also see the edge of the big river because that also had a lot of trees on the bank. And these stood out just above the water that had spread out all over the land that they could normally see. Today, when they look at the big river which is on the other side of the Billabong, they can see logs and trees being swept along in the current of the big river. They can see these logs as they float past the trees which stand at the banks of the river. "I reckon that we could have some fun if we could float like those logs," Warrigal told the others as they watched the logs float along in the current. He did like to swim, and when he looked at those logs as they floated past, he could see that they could have some fun if they could float like that. "How are we going to take one of those logs from the big river and get it into our Billabong?" asked Pilliga. "We're only young and not very strong yet." "Yeah, it sounds like fun," said Tilpa. "But we can't shift a big log like that. I'm a good swimmer, but even I can't push one of those logs across the river over to here," commented Pithara. "When I flew over the big river yesterday," said Keysbrook, "there were a lot of logs over there, but they're all big ones, and much too big for us to shift." "Well, I haven't worked out all the details yet, but I still reckon we could have a lot of fun if we could think of a way to float on the water," replied Warrigal. Although the 5 friends agreed that it would be fun to float on the water like the logs in the big river, they couldn't see how they could shift a big log to be able to float on the Billabong. They continued to watch from the top of the hill for the rest of the day, but just could not think of a way of moving a big log so that they could float on it. So at sunset they headed home and agreed to think about the problem and come back in the morning to see if anyone had an answer. Today there is still plenty of water around as they all gathered by the Billabong to find out if any of them had an answer to yesterday's problem. "Well," said Bethara, "my dad told me last night that he had seen a thing like what we want. He said that some sticks are joined together to make something like a platform that would float on the water. Then we could float on the platform as well." Warrigal, Bethara, Tilpa and Keysbrook all yelled and jumped up and down with joy. "Wow, that sounds like just what we should do too," said Warrigal after the noise had stopped. "Yeah," said the others. "It sounds like a good idea." They spent a lot of time talking excitedly amongst themselves as they tried to work out how they were going to build this platform for them all to float on the water of the Billabong. Tilpa said to the others, "I collected the reeds which we used for the kite that we made so I could get a lot more of them and we could make a platform out of those." They all decided that it would be a good start, so they went to the edge of the Billabong where the reeds are growing. There are still a few of them sticking out of the water. "I think that we'll need a lot of them so we can all float on the platform together," Warrigal told them. "Yeah, I reckon too," said Pilliga. While Tilpa was cutting the reeds, Bethara collected them and took them to the edge of the water, and Warrigal and Pilliga bundled them all together. They had a big bundle of reeds after a while, and reckoned that the bundle should be enough to make a platform for them all to float on. "Now the question is, how are we going to join all these together so they won't fall apart?" asked Warrigal. Keysbrook replied, "Well, we still have some of that string left over from the kite. We could use that to tie them all together." Keysbrook flew off to get the string and is back shortly. They tied a large bundle of reeds together and set them in the water. Warrigal suggested, "You be the first one to try it, Bethara, because if you fall off, you can swim back to the shore." So Bethara hopped onto the bundle of reeds that they had tied together. As soon as he got onto the bundle, it rolled over and he fell into the water. As he pulled himself out of the water and onto the bank of the Billabong, he told the others, "Well, it floats okay. It just rolls over when I get on top of the bundle." They could all see what he was saying, and Warrigal said, "We need to think of how we can fix that problem." Keysbrook had an idea and he yelled out, I know, he exclaimed excitedly. "Why don't we flatten out the bundle and tie a strong stick across each end to make it stay flat on the water instead of round? Then it won't roll over." Well, the idea sounds good to the rest of them too. "Does anybody know where we can find a couple of strong sticks to do just what Keysbrook suggested?" asked Warrigal. No one could tell him the answer, so Keysbrook suggested that he could fly up and see what he could find, and then he could come back and tell them where the sticks were, so the others could fetch them. "Yeah," they all said together, "that's a great idea, and it will save us some time too." So off flew Keysbrook to look for some sticks that would be strong enough to keep the reeds flat. Not before too long he found some, and went back to the others and told them where the sticks could be collected from. Warrigal, Pilliga and Tilpa went off to collect the strong sticks. Keysbrook flew overhead so he could direct them straight to where the sticks were. While they were doing this, Bethara is taking the bundle of reeds apart so that he'll be ready to fix to the sticks when they arrived back. Soon the sticks were brought to where Bethara was with the reeds. They were 6 strong sticks, so they laid 3 down on the ground, about 2 of Warrigal's foot spans between them, and then the reeds were placed across these. 3 more sticks were laid on top of the reeds just above the first lot of sticks. Then they all worked together, tying it all together with the string which Keysbrook had brought back a little while ago. This method did make a very strong platform, and now Pythara jumped onto it to try it out for the second time. The platform is moved out into the water and the string tied to it so that it would stop it from floating away. It floated very well as Pythara moved onto it. They pushed it out further into the water and he took his weight very well and did not roll over. He stayed on it for a while and then the string is pulled and he came back to the shore. This time the string is tied to the tree by the edge of the billabong and they all got on the platform together. Warrigal uses his strong legs to push the platform away from the edge of the water. It took their weight very well and continued to float. They stayed out on the platform for some time and were so overjoyed with its success that they excitedly jumped up and down and yelled at the same time. "It works! It works!" they all shouted as they jumped up and down. "I think this is the best thing we have made, and I think we should have a name for it. What do you all reckon?" asked Warrigal. "Yeah, it sure is great," they all replied. They all took some time to think about a name for the platform, and presently Keysbrook said, "I think we should call it a raft." "Why raft?" asked Warrigal, knowing that Keysbrook was quite intelligent. "Well, it stands for R for reeds, and for and, F from, and T for trees," he replied. "Well, the main part of it is from the reeds, and the sticks which made it strong come from a tree. So I think that fits," replied Keysbrook. They all thought that this was a marvellous name for their new toy, so they all yelled out as they jumped up and down for joy, "We made a raft! We made a raft!" But with their jumping up and down, one of the strings which they'd used to tie the whole thing together came apart, and one of the sticks that were under the reeds began to slip out from its position. When one end of the raft began to sink, they all exclaimed, "It's sinking! It's sinking! What will we do?" Keysbrook is the first with an idea. "Why don't we pull the string that ties the raft to the tree and pull ourselves back to the shore?" The others did not even answer. They just took hold of the string and pulled. It's not very long before the raft is back to the edge, and they all hopped off and stood on the ground beside the raft. "Phew, that was close!" exclaimed Warrigal, as they all stood looking at the raft that is low in the water at one end. "I think that the next time we go out on the raft, we should not jump up and down." "Yeah, I think that we should use some better knots to tie up the string that holds everything together," said Keysbrook. They all agreed with both of these suggestions, and working together once again, they pulled the raft up onto the ground and found the string which had caused the problem. Soon it was fixed, but Keysbrook flew off to collect some more of the vine roots that he had used to make the string. Before they all went home at sunset, the raft was completely repaired, with much more string holding the strong sticks and reeds together. Tomorrow will be another day, and the 5 friends intended to have some more fun floating on their new toy, the raft. So there we have it. The 5 friends are working together, making things to entertain themselves and learning all the time too. They seem to have so much fun in the Billabong. So much has happened beside the Billabong since last we saw the 4 bush friends with their raft. Join me again as we visit with them once more. Episode 9 is titled Scarred by the Bushfire. It was ages since it last rained. Warrigal and his friends thought it was a long time anyway. The level of the water in the Billabong is getting low, and they could walk out a long way from the old shoreline which they've become accustomed to. There's still plenty of water for Pythara the platypus to swim around in. In fact, he is out there swimming right now. He is showing off how well he has learnt to swim. His dad had taught him. He swims around in circles, then he would double back and swim in the other direction. Next he dives down to the bottom and picks up a stone in his mouth. As he reaches the surface he swings his head sideways and throws the stone at the others who are watching him from the shoreline. He didn't hit anyone, but he does like the fun of throwing the stone. Sometimes when he comes up he jumps clear of the surface of the water, does a backflip before entering the water again without a splash. The other friends are watching Pythara as he shows them what he's able to do. "By gee, Pythara, "You can do that very well," exclaimed Keysbrook the Kookaburra. "I can fly, but I can't swim like you." "I'll say," agreed Pilliga the Possum. "You are a good swimmer, and I like the acrobatics too." "And those new tricks are great," cheered on Tilpa the Tortoise. "Well, that's the best tricks I've ever seen," called Warrigal the Bunyip. After a while, Bathara is getting tired, so he swims over to where the others are waiting by the shoreline and joins them as they rest. There are some tall reeds nearby which offer them some shade, but the shady trees are now a long way from the edge of the water. Warrigal lays down in the water to cool himself off for a few minutes, but he preferred to stand. Tilpa walks in the water for a short time, just to keep herself cool. Pilliga doesn't like the water, but he does stay close to the others, as he is still just a bit timid to be by himself. Keysbrook is sitting on Warrigal's head again, so he can keep a sharp lookout for Omeo the olive python. Omeo doesn't seem to be around today, but he keeps a sharp eye out for him just the same. The dry wind is blowing from the inland, and it is hot too. The older animals had told the younger ones about the danger of bushfires, but none of the friends had seen a fire so far, and don't have any experience with it. Warrigal remembered that his dad had said in the morning, and he told the others, "My dad says that when the wind blows like this, that we might have a bushfire. He has seen one before, and he said it's very hot, dirty and smelly." "Yeah," said Pilliga, "I heard that too. My mum said that she had the end of her tail burnt one time in a bushfire. She says it's sore all the time now." The others don't know anything about bushfires, and they listen to the stories that Pilliga and Warrigal are telling them. The 5 friends work as a team and tie the tops of the reeds together so it makes a better shelter for them to rest in the shade of the hot sun. They lay down in the shade which they had just completed, and presently they are asleep. A little time passes, and soon the sun is directly above. Some of the friends stirred, but do not wake up for a while. A long way off, on the other side of the big river, a kangaroo hops along and dislodges a few rocks. They bounced off another rock in the grass, and these made a spark. The spark falls onto some dry grass, and soon there is a small fire. Because the grass is so dry, there is not a lot of smoke, but the fire burnt its way along with the breeze fanning it. Presently it comes into contact with some shrubs and bushes, which make some dark smoke. The more the wind fans the fire, the greater it becomes. Soon the fire is burning in the trees, and the smoke is becoming very dark and thick. The heat of the recent days caused all of the old leaves and grass to become dry, and with the breeze behind the fire, it soon takes hold of a large area along the bank of the big river. It isn't long before the trees have flames leaping at the tops of them, and then the breeze is blowing the sparks of the fire across the river. When the sparks reach the other side of the river, some of the dry grasses there begin burning too. Soon this fire has spread to the shrubs and bushes. It isn't long before these trees are on fire too, and this causes some very heavy black smoke to rise up into the air. Now both sides of the big river are on fire, and there's plenty of smoke. With so much smoke around, soon the friends become aware of this funny smell. Warrigal is the first to wake up and notices the funny smell, and then as he stands up, he can see the smoke in the air. "Wake up, wake up," he cried to the others. "Something unusual is going on, and you need to have a look." The others took a little time to wake up, but soon they can smell the smoke as well. "What is that awful stink?" asked Bathara. "Boy, it really does smell, doesn't it?" exclaimed Pilliga. "I bet that is a bushfire," said Tilpa. "I'll fly up in the air for a bit and see what I can find," Keysbrook told him. Then he spread his wings and flies up into the air. Presently he's back again, coughing and sputtering. "As far as I can see, there is smoke, so there must be a big fire somewhere." Warrigal told them all, "I think we should play it safe and go home to our parents. They all know what we should be doing." Off they went on their way home to ask their parents what they should do. But before they could go too far, there are flames close by them and they become frightened. So they turn back and huddle together in the water. They are now getting hot from the flames too, and their eyes are stinging from the effect of the smoke. Because the water had receded a long way from the edge of the Billabong, there is a large patch of dry sand, so the fire stops approaching the friends as they huddle together. But the fire is still burning all around them. It seems that Warrigal is taking charge, and he suggests that they stay where they are, as it looks like this is the safest place to be. They move out into the water as far as they can, and stand far from the reeds, as some of them are burning too. It seems to be taking forever for the fire to pass over them. As the smoke begins to clear, they can see the edge of the Billabong again. Most of the trees have smoke coming from them, and the grass under them is all black from the fire. The shrubs where they had walked by to get to the water are now burnt black too. Everywhere they looked, there are just blackened skeletons of bushes, as all of the leaves have been burnt and gone. It looks like everything is burnt in the fire. "Is everyone all right?" asked Warrigal as he stood there with the water up to his waist. "I'm all right, but I was a bit frightened," replied Bithara. "I just went under the water when I got hot from the fire. And my hard shell stopped a few sparks, but then I rolled over in the water, so it's okay now," said Tilpa. "A few of my feathers were singed in the heat, but I think I'm all right too," called Keysbrook. Pilliga was the last to reply. "I think I might have something wrong with my ear. It hurts," he said with a sniffle. Tilpa is the closest to him, and she had a look at his ear. "Yes," said Tilpa, "I think that you have some singed fur on the top of your ear, Pilliga." Sure enough, poor old Pilliga's ear had the tip singed by the fire. It hurt a lot, and he is upset. Now that the bushfire had passed them, they all returned home to their parents. A few days later they are together again at the edge of the water in the Billabong. They can see a long way now that there is no grass and no shrubs to block their view. They can see all of the burnt trees, the burnt reeds close to where they had sheltered from the fire, and the skeletons of the bushes that are all around them. There is a lot of black soot blowing around in the breeze, but it looks like the fire is not burning anymore. Even with Pilliga's sore ear, the friends reckon that they have gotten off very lightly from their first ever bushfire. I am so pleased that they're all okay, aren't you? How did you feel when you saw your bushfire? Were you scared too? I was. Welcome back to the Beside the Billabong video stories. The last chapter showed us how the 5 bush friends survived their first experience of a bushfire. This is episode 10 and is about drought and how they worked together again to survive their harsh surroundings. It looks like a great day as the 5 friends gather beside the edge of the Billabong again, just after the sun has risen up in the sky. It was not long ago that they had been caught out and nearly burnt in the bushfire. Poor old Pilliga's ear that got singed in the fire still hurts, so he doesn't forget about the bushfire. And because he constantly complains to the others about the pain in his ear, they don't forget about the bushfire either. But the sun is still beating down on the place where they love to visit and play, the Billabong. There has been no rain since the big flood, so the entire area that surrounds the Billabong and the big river is still black from the bushfire. Warrigal's father told him that this is going to be a long hot summer. Just to make it more difficult, food has become scarce and harder for his mum and dad to collect, and they spend so much time at collecting food that it seems he only saw them for a few minutes every day when they returned home with some food. His mum and dad had left to collect food even before he woke up this morning. The whole area is still black from the fire. The trees that should be green and have some shade for the 5 friends are black, and all of the leaves have either been burnt off or had fallen from the trees. This means that there is not very much shade for them to play under. As the friends wandered around the Billabong, Looking at the blackened bush, Keysbrook cried out, "Hey guys, come over here and have a look at this." He had just landed near the base of a tree where he had collected one of his favourite foods, a big brown bug. He pointed out some new green buds which he could see sprouting out from the bark of the tree. "Wow, just look at that," cried Tilpa as she looked at the new sprouting buds. "Does this mean that we'll soon have some more leaves and green stuff around here?" "Well, I don't know about that," replied Warrigal, "but Dad said something last week that makes me think that that may be the case. He said, we should see some green soon. And I thought that he meant some rain, but this is even better." The friends spent some time looking closely at the bush and shrubs and reeds, and surely they do have some bright green buds sprouting from their blackened surfaces. Up on the side of the stony hill is a cave, and they had spent a few days in there looking at glowworms. The cave is quite cool. They are careful now that they get out of the cave early, so they don't get mixed up with those bats again. The only shade that they have now is from the branches and the trunks of the trees, and just a few clumps of reeds that have survived the bushfire, but with the new leaves forming on most of the trees and plants, that may soon change. They make the most of what they have and still seem to find enough to keep themselves amused. There is no breeze, so they couldn't even make another kite because it needs the breeze to fly. They spend a lot of their time close to the edge of the water as Warrigal the bunyip and Bethara the platypus swim in the small puddle near the middle of the Billabong. Keysbrook the kookaburra keeps a sharp eye out for Omeo the olive green python. They don't see him very much anymore, as it's just too dry and hot for him. The summer drags on, and each day seems to be drier and hotter than the one before. The leaves that were just buds last week are now starting to pop out everywhere, and the trees look so unusual with their black trunks and branches, and the new leaves looking so bright and green. The only thing that seems to be an advantage is the fact that now the days are getting a little shorter, as the height of summer has passed, but it is still very dry. "I know what we'll do," cried Warrigal. "We'll go over and have a look at the big river, and if there's any shade over there, we could play over there for a while." Keysbrook the kookaburra said, "I'll fly over there and check out the best place for us." The others all agree that this will save them a lot of time searching, so off he flies in search of a good place for them to play in the shade of the big river. It takes some time before Keysbrook returns to the other friends. He was busy searching, but he could only find one place that was any good, but it was such a long way away for the others to walk. Presently he flies back to where they are, standing in a group, and he tells them what he has seen. Bethara the platypus is the first to speak after Keysbrook had told him the bad news. "I can't walk that far before sunset, so it's no use for us today." Tilpa the tortoise followed him by saying, "Yeah, I can't walk that far either, so I think we need to do something else." Pilliga the possum chipped in with his contribution. "Why don't we all go over to the big river and see what we can find, and then we can make up our minds together?" Everyone agreed that this was the best idea, so they all walk over to the big river. The ground is very hot, and they had to walk on tippy toes to keep their feet from burning. If anyone else was watching, they may have said that they were dancing, such was their unusual gait on the hot sand. It takes him half an hour to reach the big river, and after they all climb down the bank, all they can see is sand in the riverbed. All the trees over here have been burnt in the bushfire too, so they could not provide them with any shade. And there are a lot of new buds here too, but they will take a long time before they can provide shade on the trees again. The banks are on a slope, so they could not give much shade either, but the sand is cool, just under the surface. Warrigal, using claws on his feet, began digging. Soon he had dug a hole on the sand that was large enough for them all to sit in. They could not find any shade, but they were able to find themselves a little cooler in the sand of the big river. They all lay down in the cool sand, and presently Warrigal is fast asleep. He had done so much work digging the hole that he is exhausted. The others had walked all the way over here too from the Billabong, and they are also tired. So shortly they are all asleep in the hole in the sand in the big river. Keysbrook is the first to wake up, and it's almost dark. Sunset had already happened while they were asleep, and they would be late getting home tonight. The moon is out and shining brightly, so they do have just enough light to see so they can pick their way home through the burnt out scrub back to the Billabong and on to their homes. When they got home, they were all scolded by their parents for not telling them where they were going and for being late. They all realise now how their parents feel when they don't know where their children are. If one of the friends had got hurt, it would have taken them a long time for the parents to find them. It was several days before the 5 friends were together again, but it's still hot. They met at the edge of the Billabong again, but by now the water is just a small puddle in the centre of the Billabong. "By gee, if we don't get some rain soon, there won't be enough water for me to swim in," cried Pithara. "Yeah, that's right," replied Warrigal, "and then we'll have difficulty keeping even a little cool." "Not only that, but we need to drink. And if this Billabong dries up, where are we going to get the water that we need to drink?" asked Tilpa. "Well, I could fly up in the air again," suggested Keysbrook, "and see if I could find any water anywhere. You know I'm good at looking from the air." They all agree that it will soon be a problem, and they're glad to have a good friend like Keysbrook who can help them. So up into the air he flies, as he takes off to look for some more water. He flies out past the end of the Billabong, then he flies out over the big river again. He glides over the hill and over the flat ground to the next hill, but still he cannot find any water. So he returns to where the others are gathered. "Well, I'm sorry to have to tell you guys, but there is no more water. I searched everywhere that I could fly in half an hour, and I could not find any, but everywhere is starting to show some green." Then Warrigal had an idea. "Why don't I dig a hole here, just like the hole we dug over in the bed of the big river? If there is water on the surface here, perhaps there might be some water under the sand too." The others all agreed that this was in fact a great idea. So they stood back and watched as Warrigal digs down in the sand just a little bit away from the edge of the water. He had dug down a little way when he noticed that the sand that he was digging up is moist. Pithara squeezed some of the sand in his hand and some water droplets formed and then fell to the ground. "Wow, that's great, but do you think we'll be able to make a hole big enough for us to swim in?" he asked. As Warrigal dug down, he struck some very hard soil, and he was not able to dig any further. "No, I'm sorry, Pithara. That's as far as I can dig, and it's just big enough for us to drink from." So the 5 friends who live at the Billabong by the big river had just enough water to drink for the rest of the summer. The water that was in the rest of the Billabong had long since dried up, so now they could not swim. The summer had finished and the days become cooler, but there was still only just enough water for them to drink. By the end of summer, most of the trees provided them with some shade, the reeds that had new leaves on them. The bushes all had some green leaves that stood out in contrast to their blackened stems. "Like my dad said, you guys, this is going to be a drought. He has arthritis in his joints and it gets painful just before the rain, and he hasn't had any pain for a long time now," Warrigal told them solemnly. "He said that we'll need to be very careful of this water so it will last until it rains again." "How long before it rains then?" asked Tilpa. "My dad said that he didn't know, but it could be a long time," Warrigal told them. The friends did look after their water supply, and after many, many months of drought, they had just enough water to last them for drinking only. They could not swim, they could not have a bath or a shower, but they could rest in the shade of the trees with their new leaves. But they did have just enough drinking water till the end of the 2-year drought. For 2 years they'd not even seen a cloud in the sky. Close to the end of the second winter, some wispy clouds began to form up on the northern horizons. Clouds did not look like rain clouds and soon disappeared again. A few days later a breeze began to blow from the north. Today the friends gathered at the drinking holes again, and there are a few light clouds in the sky and a gentle breeze blowing from the north again. My dad said that his arthritis is playing up again last night, so he thinks we might get some rain soon, Warrigal tells the others. But they're all a bit older now and have seen rain before, and looking forward to having that experience once again. Wow, wouldn't it be great if we could have some more rain soon, said Bathara the platypus. I'd love to have a swim again. Yeah, they all replied at the same time. The rain would be great. Yeah, I'd just love to watch those leaves as they jump when the water hits them, explained Tilpa, as she was excited by the prospect of seeing rain again. Do you think it might make a big flood like last time? Asked Pilliga. Dad doesn't know how much we might get, if we get any at all, replied Warrigal. Oh gee, Warrigal, don't trick us like that. First it's going to rain and then it's not. What's it going to be, wet or dry? Complained Keysbrook. My dad really doesn't know, but we'll need to wait and see, retorted Warrigal. They can see that the clouds seem to be getting a bit darker and the breeze is becoming just a little bit cooler. But the sunset is about to happen and it's time that they all head off home. See yous all tomorrow, cried Tilpa as they all gloomily head off. We'll see what tomorrow brings, suggested Keysbrook as he flies off to his favourite tree. Sunrise had just completed and all of the clouds in the sky are coloured in pinks, greys and whites. Some of them have black bottoms too. The friends are all excited as they gather together by the Billabong again. Boy, it certainly looks like it will rain today, cried Keysbrook. I hope so too, the others all answered together. If they have some rain, it will end the drought. Will it rain again, or will the drought continue? What do you think? The seasons in the outback can be ferocious as the 5 bush friends find themselves working together so that they can continue to survive in these harsh conditions. What will they get up to next? Will they all survive if it doesn't rain again soon? Look, I don't know either. I reckon we all feel like we are alongside them all the time. Well, thanks for watching my story and being part of my audience. I've had a lot of fun putting it all together, and I hope you've learnt that by helping others near you, we can all survive.